drove the U-Haul down with two little boys. And they were sitting there in the front seat with me. And on the way down, we blew a tire. And we were out in the middle of the Nevada desert, and it took a long time to get a new tire and get on the road again. So by the time we got to Arizona, it was early in the morning as we were driving into Phoenix. And right as we were passing the end of the runway at Sky Harbor, the fuel pump went out on that U-Haul. And we just kind of coasted off an on-ramp and ended up sitting right at the end of a runway. And it was just about light. A little before light, and I took those two little boys who'd been in that truck with me all night, and we went hiking to find a gas station or something. And we were gone for about an hour, and when we returned to the truck, there were sirens, there were all kinds of emergency vehicles. There was a tow truck came just wheeling in real fast, a big semi tow truck, and I came walking up with these little guys, and an officer told me I had to leave the area. And I said, "That's my truck." He's like, "That's your truck?" And I said, "Yeah, we broke down." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, get over here." And he said, "We shut down the entire airport. All flights have been canceled. This is just after 9/11, so the security was really high."
Oh my gosh.
Glad to be back in Arizona. Well, it's a real honor to be here and to be able to talk about Anasazi. At each of your tables, there's a book, Outdoor Survival Skills by Larry Dean Olsen. That is a copy of the very first printed edition, which I have here. 1967. I was going to read you a couple of quotes, but I can't see, so I'm just going to go from memory on those. But in the introduction of this book, Larry Olsen describes that this book is full of simple's not the word, little things. He said, it's often said in life, it's the little things that matter. And this book is just a bunch of little things. And there's so many examples throughout. But I want to tell you a little story about little things that made a big difference for me later on in life. When I was 4 years old, sometime around my birthday, it was in the fall, we were living in Montana, and my father said, "Hey, I'm going to take you just by yourself, and we're going to go on an overnighter up into the mountains." So we got ready in the middle of the day, and we took off, and all we had with us was just our clothing, and my dad brought a knife. No blanket, no food, and we went hiking, and just straight from the ranch where we were living. And we walked up into the mountains. I remember feeling like it was a really long way. My dad was gathering edible plants as we went and telling me what they were, and we were eating some of them raw. We went through a willow patch, and he cut a willow, and he carved, while he was walking, he carved a little knife for me, a little toy knife. I remember just loving that. He also collected material for a bow drill set as we hiked. And after what seemed like a long time, we arrived at a spot, a big rock, and he said, "We're going to spend the night right here." He had me help him gather grass, and we went and we cut grass and carried bundles of it over and made a bed of grass. And then we gathered firewood, and we stacked the firewood at the head of the bed up at the top. And then we made a fire. He made a fire using the bow drill set. And put a big reflector rock up next to the fire. So we had a rock behind us and a rock in front of us in the fire. And roasted some roots and things on the coals. Got dark. We had a nice fire going. And we laid down on that grass bed. And my dad had his back to the rock, and I was laying in front of him with my back against him. And I used his arm for a pillow. And I remember just laying there with the warmth of the fire on me and the heat of my father behind me. And I didn't wake up till morning throughout the night, he just would reach up with his free arm and grab wood and just put it on that fire and kept it going throughout the night. Well, when I arrived on site at Olsen, dropped off by the helicopter, kind of looked around my area, I saw some grass. And I went and I cut that grass into bundles and carried it to a spot that looked like there was good wind protection to my back. I made a grass bed. I made a fire. I gathered firewood and I put it right above my head. So that through the night when I get cold, I could just reach up and grab a stick and put it on the fire. It's really simple. Those are really simple things, really simple skills that my father showed me when I was 4 years old. And all I had to do when I was out there was just replicate that. And as I looked through this book, I read it before I left, and truly is a manual for doing something like Alone. It's full of little things that added up to making the experience, what it was for me. A simple behavior of just first thing, making sure that I had a good place to sleep and be warm, good rest, made all the difference in playing that game. Being able to really focus. So I'm grateful for this book, super happy to get a copy to each of you. We've actually been searching for a first edition. Got a call from a friend who said, my grandfather died, we were going through his things, we found a copy of this book. And I said, well, open it up, and what date does it have in it? And it was 1967. I was so happy to get a copy finally. I have a couple of slides up here. I want to talk about them a little bit. First of all, the hand axes that I'm holding there, those were laying all over the ground in South Africa, in the area where we filmed the show. There was a particular type of stone there, a fine-grained basalt. It's the same kind of fine-grained basalt that we have here in this area that a lot of Anasazi trail walkers and some young walkers have become very proficient at flint knapping. And as a matter of fact, Rodney Dotson's in the room here. He's a master. Recently made a gift for my wife out of that stone, a Clovis point. Anyway, this stone that I'm holding in my hand, one piece of it is that same fine-grained basalt. And these stones date, the technology, the people that built those started doing so about 2 million years ago. And they made those repeatedly for over 1 million years in that area, because it was a place where they quarried that stone, went to get that fine tool stone. The area was just covered with these hand axes that had accumulated over 1 million years. Not by Homo sapiens, but by Homo erectus. And being in that spot and trying to survive there, and seeing that, hominids had done so for millions of years, I felt a connection to that. The theme here, never really alone. For me, that deep, deep history of humanity there was really meaningful and inspiring. I thought, well, if all of them could do it for 1 million years, maybe I can too. The shelter there that you see, that was a shelter I ended up building near that spot, not too far away, on the little peninsula that I was living on near the lake. There was a ruin, a little stone ruin, much like the ruins you would see around this area from the Ho'oham. And I noticed it, first day that I was there, and found it really interesting that somebody else had, lived right there in that same spot. So when it was time for me to build my shelter, I patterned it after that ruin. So it's the exact same dimensions as, the home that somebody else had lived there previously. And that to me was a connection. Like I really felt a connection to the past, to the people who had gone before. And certainly, while I was there, alone in the wilderness, for those of you that don't know what the show is, they take 10 participants, send you all out, you're by yourself, you film yourself, and whoever lasts the longest wins the show. And one of the biggest challenges, of course, for participants is being away from loved ones for an extended period of time and being in that setting. For me, I felt so close to my family while I was out there. I felt close to my parents because I was, doing the things that they had taught, right? So I felt that connection to family and a family tradition around, wilderness survival. I had a little practice every day later while I was there that I would pick one of my children, and that day as I was working to survive, I would try to remember as many things about them as I could from the time they were born. I just was digging through those files in my brain, one per day. I felt so close to them. I was never really alone out there. And I reflected on, the experience that young walkers have here at Anasazi. I've worked the trail for many, many years and saw the experience over and over and over again. And I saw that happening to myself in this experience. They showed the video when my son Isaiah came to pick me up and that little reunion that we had. And you noticed it's no different than the reunions that parents and children are having, on the Anasazi Trail every week. And so, I think I have a new prescription or a recommendation for Anasazi, and that is, send the parents out for an extended period. It was amazing for me. I want to point out one other thing about this book, the introduction. Earlier, Paul Newman was recognized as the first trail walker that worked with Ezekiel and Larry. And I think he says it a little differently. He says, I was their first experiment. He was 17 years old at the time that they began experimenting on him. And thank you, Paul, for going through all of those struggles so the rest of us could follow. Really, really amazing to see you here today. One other thing I want to mention, on your tables there's an evaluation report. I think there's just one copy per table. This is an evaluation of Anasazi Foundation outcomes. Mike Merchant, many years ago, got together with other wilderness therapy programs, and they collaborated and they decided to start collecting data. And I was able to be a part of that data collection, the data warehouse, where all that information was stored. And they began having parents and young walkers fill out a survey, before treatment, at the end of treatment, 6 months and a year later. And they collected that data for many, many years. And this report contains the information from all that data. And over those years, Anasazi, the over 5,000 families that it's worked with, has had overwhelmingly great success shown in the data. There's been clinically significant improvement in mental health, behavioral health, and in relationships. I applaud Anasazi, I applaud Mike for getting that started so many years ago, because this is the information that validates the work that Anasazi does. We all know that it's a great experience. We have personal connection to that. But now we have a report that really clearly demonstrates scientifically that the Anasazi Foundation is very effective. In recent years, there's been a little bit of criticism around wilderness therapy. And that group that Mike helped organize, they also collected data for many years. And they collected data around incidents, injuries, fatalities. And we just looked at that data recently. It represents over 2.2 million days for young people in the wilderness. And that's over 38,000 young people that have gone out and experienced a wilderness therapy program. And one of the key findings is that youth in the wilderness, 40 to 60 days, are 6.5 times less likely to die than youth in the general population for that same time period. So that really flips the narrative. You know, if anyone's saying wilderness therapy is dangerous, actually it's 6.5 times safer than regular life. And the data set is huge. 2.2 million days. So it's undebatable, it's validated, the outcomes are great. Wilderness therapy works, it's here to stay. Thank you for your support, everybody. It's really heartwarming to see this turnout and this commitment to the young people and the families who are being served. I'll close with, well, I won't read it, but in the introduction,